Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel about Invictus. Invictus is a high fantasy role-playing game that I've been writing for a while. It's set in a fictional world with humans, elves, dwarves. It has a lot of elements that you might have seen in games like Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder or Warhammer Fantasy. One of the big differences from this and other games is that your character remains fundamentally mortal. You do have classes, but you don't have levels. You never gain more hit points. So you gain mystical powers, you get stronger, you get more abilities, but at the end of the day, you're still just a human being, or a mortal in this case. We're talking about elves and dwarves and things like that. And today I want to talk to you a bit about the magic system, and we're going to introduce what are called pattern and thread spells. This is going to be a very quick look into the world of magic. One of the goals in my world of magic is that it really feels like you're doing something reality breaking, something that is outside of the norm. But before we get any further into it, I want to ask you to please subscribe to the channel if you want to see more about this. It's free, right? Let's say you're new to YouTube and you're running around, you see subscribe. I'm not asking for money. Just hit the subscribe button. And that's your way of telling YouTube that you might want to see more videos that I make. All right, I want to remind you to feed the algorithm. That means like, comment down below. Those sorts of things really help a small channel like mine that tells YouTube that maybe other people also want to see my content. So really quickly here, I've got some art. I'm really excited. I bought some stock art. If you want to know where it came from, you can look in the channel description. This is going to be one of my signature characters. This is Miles. He's currently on a long stay with the Order of Talos in Emberheim. He's looking to get out soon, though. We'll see what happens. And these are the 6 terrestrial elements that make up the world. Now, each element we're going to see in a moment has its own corresponding essence. This is working very similar to a Greek classical elements. You've got your air, your water, your fire, your earth, and then there's 2 more that aren't traditionally seen in the elemental breakdown, and that is frost and sand. And we're going to look at that a little bit more in depth now. So the terrestrial elements and essences are split into sort of 2 rough categories. We've got the more dynamic elements and the more static elements, and that is things like water, air, and fire are more dynamic, and they have their corresponding essences, which you can see in here. Water is hydros, air is eros, fire is pyros, sand is zeros, though some people who might know a little bit of Greek might think I should have used samos. I'm really looking for more than not really sand, but dry. Things like gunpowder would be thought of as zeros in sort of a physical form, and that's holding fire essence inside of it. We'll get into all that in future videos. I'm just telling you why I haven't gone with a direct translation there. And then earth is geos and frost is cryos. And then each of these essences have their own things that they do. Air tends to make things lighter. It also tends to make things not have form or amorph, as I'm calling it. Earth tends to make things heavy or to form and solidify, things of that nature. Remember, in this world, we don't have gravity, right? We don't have fundamental forces in the way that our world does. This is a what if the idea of the Greek elements was actually real? What might that world look like? And we call a lot of that magic. We have another character here. This is Enid Zarin. She's a gnome wizard of the House Zarin, and she's currently looking for her sister Tara, who was last seen somewhere around Emberheim as well. Emberheim is going to be one of our big cities in our setting. Okay, so each of these essences has its own effect. That means that if you were to cast a spell with water versus fire, they would have very different effects based on which essence you are using. And so I'm going to use the word essence and elements a bit interchangeably, even though they're not technically interchangeable. The element is the thing you interact with and touch in real life, right? So as wind is coming by you, you're feeling air. The essence that's in that air is eros. And then the elements aren't just arranged in this pattern here haphazardly, they actually have oppositions. So for example, fire is the opposite of frost, and that is if you mix pyros with cryos, they actually annihilate, and they create ephemera. Ephemera is our 7th essence in our magic system. It is kind of like colorless mana, or pure just magical energy that can be used. And we'll get into all that in later videos. This is really deep. I will warn you that this is not something that I have play tested yet. It's just been all theory crafting, but I think it's something that's a little bit different in this system than others, so I wanted to get that out in front of you now. Okay, Mages will attune to a particular essence. So you might be a water mage or a fire mage or an earth mage or something of that nature. That is, you generally have a spell called the aura spell, and you will attune your aura to that. And as you move through the world, you will collect essences from your aura. All right. So, for example, if you were an air mage and you attuned your aura to Eros, as you move through the day, you're going to collect a lot of Eros. This is the game mechanical way of refilling your energy, right? So you're going to collect Eros, but then because water and fire are adjacent, they are allied or sympathetic with it. So you also collect a fair number of water essence and a fair bit of Pyros essence. So, basically you pick your mage, say, I'm going to pick one of these elements and I'm going to collect the two neighboring elements as well throughout the day. Okay. So you attune to that, and that's how you recharge, but that's really outside of the focus of this video. And then you can cast a spell if you don't have this essence directly. So the idea is like you're an air mage, you might have 10 motes of essence inside of you. You can cast a spell with that essence, but if you don't have it, you can draw it from the environment around you. It just is harder to do. So for example, if you're in a freezing cold tundra and you're a fire mage, it's a lot harder for you to draw Pyros essence from the area around you. But if instead, while your party was taking a rest and you made a campfire and you drew the Pyros essence from that campfire during that rest or recharge time, you'll have plenty of essence ready to go. Okay, so the first thing here is pattern spells. So what are pattern spells? These are basically a spell that will do something once you put an element into it. The first example is not the best, but that's extract. And that's basically, I'm going to extract essence from this element. So you're sitting in front of a fire and you're drawing in essence from that fire. You're near blocks of ice or snow, you're drawing in cryos essence from that. It's a cool night, I'm going to draw essence from that. Technically, everything has a little bit of every essence in it, so you can draw essence from any source. It's just might increase that difficulty to do it. And then you have an aura, and this aura lets you collect essence throughout the day, and then it also has an effect based on the essence that it's attuned to. So a fire mage might give off a bit of radiant warmth. If you've got a strong attunement to fire, you might burn and singe plant life as you're walking around, things of that nature. Whereas an air mage might not even touch the ground as they're walking, right? They're so attuned to air, they just sort of float around. So each of those things kind of manifests. And this level 0, level 1 is the level of the spell. Remember, there are no character levels in this game. So a level 0 spell is the simplest kind of gateway spells that you learn as a magic user or a mage, and then the level 1 spells there. So then there's a spell called Grasp, and this is a level 1 pattern spell. What does that mean? Well, if you put fire essence into it, it's burning grasp. If you put frost essence into it, it is freezing grasp. If you put ephemera into it, or mera into it, as I often call it, it's shocking grasp. Mera is like raw energy or electricity, things of that nature. And then this goes like this all the way down the line. So I can make a shield spell from fire essence. That shield spell wouldn't be as strong as if I'd made it from earth essence, but it would burn people that got too close to me, and it would burn ranged attacks that were coming in towards me. So depending on which essence you use on your spell, you're going to change the way that spell functions. All right, and then we sort of have these tiered up, so level 1, level 2 spells. So then I've got things like strike and ray and wall, right? I'm not just going to make magic wall, I'm going to make fire wall, I'm going to make an earth wall, I'm going to make a water wall. And those are all going to have different properties based on the essence that I've chosen to invest into them. And then sort of our next sort of level here, we're seeing, fire blast, frost blast, earth blast, things of this nature. All of these spells function differently based on the essence that you put into them. So I don't know about yourself, but I love D&D. I love D&D products until I play them, right? They're always fun to read, but then when you play them, they just don't work the way you want. But I'll pick up some new book that's D&D adjacent or something like that, and I look at it on the back, it's like 300 new spells. And my heart sinks. I'm like, 300? I don't want to learn 300 new spells. Well, this is my solution to that, right? So level 4 Storm. If you look on this screen here, I think there's 10 or 12 spells or so, and 14, I guess. And I can do math. And then you've got your essences. So this is 14 spells with your 7 different essences that you can use which instead of writing up a separate description for each and every one of them, there's a base spell. That spell then has some modification that it gets from an essence. And what does that look like? Well, if it's a direct damage spell and you're putting, say, wind into it, well, wind is not an incredibly destructive element, so it does a little bit less damage than a standard bolt. So an example is I want to cast an air bolt. So with an air bolt, you put in arrows into that. That means it is a little less damage than normal. It gains the stun trait, so it can stun someone. And then when you hit them, in addition to the damage that it does, that bolt swirls. That means that's going to push that person that you've hit with that air bolt back 5 feet or 1.5 meters in any direction. So you could push, pull, whatever you want to do. You hit them, move around. And then because there's always that one player that says, can I push them up in the air? Sure can. I can push that person straight up into the air. And then on their turn, they would fall, or sorry, in the next combat tick, they would fall and have to decide whether they land on their feet. But you could use this to shove someone off a cliff. There you go. Bye-bye. And I try not to involve saves. Things just work. So I hit you, you move. What's another example? I could use Pyros, right? Pyros is a much more damaging essence. So the bolt normally does 4 points of damage. Under air, it would do 3. Under Pyros, it would do 5. And it doesn't cause bleeding, which you might expect from destructive essences because fire cauterizes wounds, right? But what it does do is it makes that hit more serious when you experience it, right? And where is this coming from? I wanted my world to reflect the magic, right? So we often see in fiction, someone brings out fire spells and everyone kind of recoils and pulls away as if they're terrified. Well, why are people afraid of fire? Well, my in-game answer is that Pyros wounds are counted more severely. The first video on this channel shows how wounds work, and that is there's a threshold system. If you get above a threshold, that wound is counted more seriously when you take it. If it's a medium wound, you lose power, that is, your dice get downgraded on every future action. If it's a severe wound, you lose even more power and are downgraded even more. So fire spells always count as if they're 2 more points of damage than they actually are. If this doesn't make any sense to you, just know that fire hurts, right? I think that's intuitive. And maybe go back and watch that first video. One day when I learn how to put cards, I'll put a card in here. But basically, fire hurts, and that's why people are afraid of it. Okay, so let's look at these essence effects a little bit more in depth. As we just said, air pushes people around, shoves them around. Fire hurts, right? When you take fire damage, it really is not comfortable. When you take Zeros damage, this is, again, not as destructive as fire, so there's a little bit less damage, but it can cause bleeding. Think about fire flame, or sand flaying the flesh off of you. And then what it does is it makes you blind, or a little bit blinded, so you have exposure. Exposure is something that lowers basically like your armor class. I don't have armor class, but I have a dodge defense, a block defense, a parry defense. And so it lowers your defenses. And then it makes it so you have a harder time acting on your turn. And then that goes away at the end of your turn. But this is a way that mages can have some battlefield control. So if I've got Zeros, in my staff or something like that, and I want to use it, I can cast it into a bolt, hit an enemy, and then lower their accuracy for melee attacks, and then really lower their accuracy for ranged attacks. So this gives mages a bunch of things to play with. What are some other examples? Geos, right? Earth stuns, right? So if you want to stun someone, hit them with an earth bolt. And this is a really good chance of stunning them, making them lose some of the actions that they can use in combat. Frost gives a frostbite effect. So again, this is anytime you use a frost spell in a way that would cause damage, it adds these effects. This might seem complicated, but I think that it will actually overall simplify the way that magic works, because you have a number of basic spells, you have a number of elemental effects, and you just put them together to make the spell you're trying to do. So once you know these base effects, you know how to put them together, and you're not looking up a bunch of super specific text every time you cast a spell. At least that's my thought. This has really been a theory-crafted system. I've explained it to people. They seem to like it. They don't get too glossy-eyed, so that's a measure for me that I'm doing okay. But I haven't actually played this stuff out. Water can also stun people, but it also can splash and do an AoE. So anytime you cast a water bolt or something like that, it's going to do a little bit less damage, but it gives you an in-game AoE that you can try to hit other targets with. And then Mara, again, Mara is the raw magical energy. This is like electricity or charge. Mara can hit you, shock you, and make it so that you're not as able to take as strong of actions on your turn. So again, if you're just watching this video trying to learn to play, it's going to feel pretty overwhelming. I'm really just trying to say, like, look at what we're doing in this. I think it's really fun. Hopefully you do as well. All right, what else do I have? I have something called thread spells. And before we get into that, we're meeting Orion Valenthor. He is a human wizard. His sister is actually the Queen of Emberheim, though he doesn't live anywhere near Emberheim. He's probably going to come visit her soon. Okay, so one of my spells that I have called a thread spell is Amplify. Amplify is a spell that mages learn. Now remember, from my past video, I want mages, I want magic users to really feel like they are doing something that is not mundane. You are doing something substantial. So a mage that learns the thread spell Amplify can increase or decrease any magical effect they find. So let's say you're trying to go into a cave and you find there's a magic shield over the cave. That mage can walk up and diminish, basically reverse the effect of Amplify, diminish that shield and maybe create a hole through it. Anytime you see an ingrained magic effect somewhere, you can make it stronger or decrease it with your magic abilities. But that is not necessarily that exciting at this moment. It's a neat ability, but the real magic comes from what I call weaving. That is, you weave your thread spells into your pattern spells. So I'm trying for a little bit of linguistic fun there. Weaving, that is, if you weave Amplify into a spell, you can give the spell more effect. I've never done much with meta magic in D&D, but I do know that with the sorcerers, they can do these sorts of things. So this is similar to that idea. And a more specific example is, I have a firebolt, I weave Amplify into it. That makes the firebolt do more damage. So that is, I want to cast Firebolt, I have a bank of raw essence, I take some of that essence, I shove it into the spell, and boom, it's doing more damage. All right, another thread spell I have is Channel. And the Channel spell allows you to move essence from one place to another. So if you're a wizard, you generally do a lot of magic with devices, and one of the reasons you do that is you can store essence in those devices. So if you're a wizard, you're tinkering around, you're making new items that can store more magical power in them, so your staff is maybe a focus for your spell, but it's really a big mana battery, a place that you can put essence in. So you can take essence from one location and put it in another. So you're sitting by a fire, you're drawing off the essence that's being released from the fire, you're putting it into your staff, because you as a person can only hold so much. That's why you use these other devices to hold that. So you use the Channel thread spell to pull it from one place, put it into another. If you want to weave it, that allows you to continuously feed magic into an effect. So for example, with that firebolt just a moment ago, you cast your firebolt that hits someone. If you channel essence into it, it's now going to be a continuous stream of essence from you to that person, where you're hitting them again and again and again with that fire damage. Another example is, let's say you want to cast a grass spell and you put frost essence into it, and then you use channel. You're now continuing to freeze someone every tick of combat. Not every turn, every tick. The ticks are between the turns. So you're acting on other people's turns as you're continuing to feed energy into that target. Magic in my system is powerful, but mages can't afford to invest in things like stamina that give you hit points. And if they do, they're then not as strong as mages. So there is a trade-off in this system. So if you want to make a magic user that can really whoop some ass, you're going to be soft and squishy, and that's the way I like it. All right, another example of a thread spell is one called a flux. A flux causes essence to suddenly burst forth from an object. So let's say you want to cast that frost grass spell on someone, and you then weaved into it a flux instead. That's now going to explode frost from your hand, hitting anyone in the immediate area. Well, if you wanted to weave it, that's what they're saying. Sorry, I got ahead of myself. A flux as a spell by itself causes essence to suddenly explode forth from something. So if you used a flux on a piece of wood, you could cause the fire essence inside of that to suddenly burst forth from it. If you wanted to weave it, you cause the spell itself to burst forth. And then this is the firebolt explodes when it hits someone. This is how we get a spell like Fireball. All right. Here's another one, Imbue. Imbue gives an object properties of the element or the essence. So if I want to imbue something with earth, that's going to make it a lot heavier. Or if I want to imbue something with earth, that might make it more solid or solidified. So I've got, you know, something that's super fragile and I'm trying to transport it from one location to another. If I imbue it with earth, I make it more rigid and more able to go from place to place. Or if I want to make a door really hard to open or a crate really hard to move, I imbue it with earth essence. Or I want to make a crate easy to move, I'm going to imbue it with air essence. That's basically the idea here. Mages have a lot of freedom. This is not, here is the spell description and you must exist within this spell description. It is, here is the spell's intention and you now exist within that intention to work your creativity into the world. So what does imbue do as a weaving? You add those properties to the spell. These, in my mind, don't work as well with combat type spells, but there are many non-combat spells. Like I'm not sure what the benefit of making a firebolt lighter, but someone's going to come up with a reason, and I'm looking forward to it. All right, Moliate. This is another thread spell that allows you to shape or alter an element. So the closest thing I would have to this from D&D is like mold or move earth, although that spell drives me bonkers. But the idea is I want to modify or shape an essence or an element that exists in the world, and I'm going to use Moliate to do that. Okay, weaving, you can alter the shape or size of a spell. So for example, you might take a firebolt and weave into it Moliate and divide that firebolt into 2 smaller bolts. And then you're worried about the loss of damage, you're going to weave in Amplify. So you're going to take Firebolt, you're going to make it stronger, you're going to use Moliate to then split into 2, and you're going to send those at your opponent. As a mage, you've got the ability to do that stuff. But it carries a lot more weight on that player. This is not a look at my list of abilities and figure out how to what they do. This is on other people's turns. You're thinking, okay, what's the thing I'm going to do on my turn? So if you've ever wanted to play a magic user that really got to do things that was fun and creative, but you didn't want to hurt your game master in the way that like Mage the Awakening did, hopefully this is your system. All right. Now my question from you is, what do you want to see next, right? Do you want to see another how to play video? Do you want to see character creation more in depth? Do you want to see genus or species, class abilities, domain abilities, combat? Actually finally see that video I promised in the Gladius and the Scimitar, weapons and armor and how I built those, spell casting part 2. Do you want to see more of this, like actually how the dice system works? I'd love to get into that more. Lore and world building. Did you like the art in this video? Comment down below. Let me know what you think. Prophecies of Topeth, that is the coming of the destruction of the world, or other. Thank you so much for watching. I want to ask you again to please like and subscribe. Thank you. My name is David.